Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. Book 2. This is an intriguing epic story which resonates with love, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Before we dive into the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader that this novel has been narrated in 2 books. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the real life of a Muslim family. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Therefore, any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, events, or locales is merely coincidental. Chapter 18. Controversy about the status of women in Islam. To do justice to Natasha as well as to Muslim feminists, let us summarize the 5th chapter of her doctorate dissertation. In this chapter, Dr. Natasha dealt with the claims of Muslim feminists, which stated that Islam treats equally man and woman. Many Muslim feminists today are critically studying and rewriting the issue of male versus female gender in Islam. Most of them admit that Muslim women are marginalized in the Islamic societies. However, they argue that it is not the true teaching of the Holy Quran, but the hadiths that put women in a lower status than men. Therefore, to uplift women and give them equal rights as men, Muslim feminists argue that the misogynistic hadiths, sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, must be disregarded. They believe that these misogynistic hadiths were the creation of a later generation of Muslim leaders and scholars and hence do not represent the true message of the Quran, which gives equal rights to men and women. Many prominent Muslim scholars reject the feminists' views. The fundamentalists argue that the hadiths are authentic sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, and rejecting them means denying the words of the infallible Prophet of Islam. They believe that it is not possible to understand the Quran without the hadiths, for the latter explain the former. Accordingly, in the contemporary Muslim world, the hadiths, the life, sayings, and deeds of the Prophet Muhammad became a matter of disputation among scholars. In one camp, the feminists, reformists, and modernists call for a distinction between the misogynistic message of Islam, which contradicts the true spirit of the religion, and the egalitarian message of the Quran, which represents Islam in its purest form. In the other camp, we find the fundamentalists, traditionalists, and conservatives who accept all the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, which are in turn incorporated in the Sharia. Though in a few cases, members of this second group are prepared to distinguish between authentic and non-authentic hadiths, the disputations between these 2 camps have not yet been settled, and due to outside influences, the gulf between the 2 is becoming wider day after day. That said, these academic and scholarly issues have not affected the life of the average Muslim woman. Most Muslims today accept the teachings of Islam, which have been passed down from generation to generation and preserved in the Sharia, which in turn draws its authority and validity from the Quran and the Hadiths. In her dissertation, Dr. Natasha argued that she would like to examine critically the views of Muslim feminists and see whether their claims can be established despite the long tradition of Islam in which the Sharia, which is based on the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, became the governing norms and laws of Muslims. Muslim scholars agree upon the authenticity of 2 collections of the hadiths, Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Other collections such as Muwatta Malik, Sunan Abu Dawud, Sunan Ibn Majah, and Al-Tirmizi have also been accepted and used in the formation of the Sharia. In general, the Hadiths collections are works that record in minute detail what the Prophet of Islam said and did. They constitute, along with the Quran, the book revealed by Allah, both the source of law and the standard for distinguishing the true from the false, the permitted from the forbidden. They have shaped Muslim ethics and values, citing Mirnisai 1993, page 1. For many Muslims, the authenticated hadith is sacred literature, only second in holiness to the Quran, Quoting an article by Stroesser 1992, page 1. In comparing the authority of the former to the latter, the authentic hadith is believed to be nothing short of revelation, for the Quran says of Muhammad, he does not speak out of low desires. It is not but inspiration inspired, Surah Al-Najm 53, verses 3-4. The only difference between the Quran and the Hadith is that whereas the former was revealed directly through the angel Gabriel with the very letters that are embodied by Allah, the latter was revealed without letters and words. Citing Hack and Newton 1996, page 1. The Quran strongly endorses the authenticity of the Hadiths and leaves Muslim men and women with no preference between the two. Whenever Allah and the Apostle have decided a matter, it is not for a faithful man or woman to follow a course of their own choice. Surah Al-Ahzab 33, verse 36. Despite this strong belief in the Hadiths, today we find that some Muslim scholars, especially the feminists and the reformists, do not hesitate to question the authenticity of the Hadith. They accept the important place that the Hadith occupies in Islam, but they want to distinguish between the authentic and non-authentic tradition of the Prophet. They use the Quran as a measuring rod. Any Hadith that contradicts the egalitarian spirit of the Quran should be rejected. This argument assumes that the Quran does not include a misogynistic message within its pages. One of these is the Professor Rifat Hassan, who states, "It is a clear teaching of the Quran that men and women are equal in the sight of God." Hassan 2001, page 63. That said, the egalitarian message of the Quran is a controversial issue as well. A few Muslim feminists see contradictions in the Quran, and they support their views by referring to its teachings of men's superiority, polygamy, divorce, and wife-beating. See Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34, Surah 4, verse 3, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 228, Surah 2, verse 282, and Surah Al-An'am 6, verse 10. The Egyptian feminist Nawal El-Saadawi is one of those feminists who see contradictions in the Quran. She notes that God says in his book that he created men and women from the same soul, and then in another page says the opposite, that men are superior to women. Saadawi 2001, page 4. Thus, the egalitarian message of the Quran is not a settled issue. Those who preach such a message must travel a long way before they can win even one convert. For their quest to formulate Quranic-based agendas for a renewed Islamic order, the general Muslims' reaction to the questioning of the Hadith's authenticity remains strongly negative. Stroesser 1992, page 1. Sample of the misogynistic Hadiths. Allah's Apostle once said to a group of women, "I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious, sensible man can be led astray by some of you." The women asked, "O Allah's Apostle, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion?" He said, "Is not the evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man?" They replied in the affirmative. He said, "This is the deficiency of your intelligence. Isn't it true that a woman can neither pray nor fast during her menses?" The women replied in the affirmative. He said, "This is the deficiency in your religion." Sahih Bukhari, Hadith number 301. The authenticity of the above hadith is beyond dispute. It is mentioned repeatedly in the most authentic two collections of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. When al-Bukhari and Muslim both accept a hadith, it is called mutafagan alayhi, which means agreed upon. Muslim scholars consider this the highest degree of authenticity. Hack and Newton 1996, page 3. The Arabic phrase al-Nisa najasatan aglayan wadan, women are deficient in intelligence and religion, is on the tip of every Muslim's tongue. This statement is used by scholars as well as lay people to define women. There is a famous proverb in the Arab countries which says, "If a woman becomes an axe, she will not cut a head of anyone." This proverb does not only mean that the woman is weak, but she is utterly useless. To turn to further examples. The woman is like a rib. If you try to straighten her, she will break. Therefore, if you want to get benefit from her, do so while she still has some crookedness. Sahih Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 113. Women are ungrateful to their husbands and are not grateful for the favors and the charitable deeds done to them. If you have always been benevolent to one of them and then she sees something in you, not of her liking, she will say, I have never received any good from you. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 1, Hadith number 28. When a woman comes, she comes in the form of a devil. Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 3240. The Prophet Muhammad said, I have not left any calamity or fitna after me more detrimental to men than women. Al-Bukhari and Muslim agreed upon this hadith. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 33. He also said, O women, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you, women. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 1, Hadith number 301. The Prophet said, amongst the inmates of paradise, the women will form the minority. Sahih Muslim, Hadith number 6600. The Prophet Muhammad also said, those who entrust their affairs to a woman will never know prosperity, citing Murnisa 1993, page 49. Based on this hadith, the Sharia does not permit a Muslim woman to assume any leadership position such as a president, judge, lawyer, boss, imama, calipha, etc. Fatima Murnisa notes that some hadiths, prophetic tradition, originated from Kitab al-Bukhari, which are told by the teachers hurt me. They state that the Prophet said, dog, donkey and woman would annul anyone's prayer whenever they pass ahead them, break off between the praying man and Qibla. I was shocked to hear that sort of hadith and never repeat it with the hopes that silence would wipe away this hadith out of my mind. I asked, how come the Prophet said that sort of hadith which hurt me so much? How could the beloved Muhammad hurt a little girl who is in her growth, attempt to make him as pillars of her romantic dreams? Murnisa 1991, page 82. Muslim women and the tradition. Perhaps the most accurate accounts in which Muslim women have been placed by the Islamic heritage can be found in the writings of the Egyptian Muslim liberal thinker, Sayyid Mahmud al-Kimni. In his book, Rab al-Zaman, The Lord of This Time, under an article entitled, Women in Religious Heritage and Legends, which he delivered as a lecture to the People's Progressive Women's Union. Al-Kimni held the Islamic heritage responsible for degrading Muslim women, Al-Kimni 96, page 219. According to him, the religious heritage made the woman to believe she has been created from a bent rib, deficient in religion and intellect. Her testimony equals half of a man's. Her inheritance is half of a man's. She cannot divorce. Page 220. The Muslim woman believes herself to be a Satan and therefore she cannot control her sexual desires. Page 221. According to the Islamic heritage, woman succumbs to her lust and not intellect. She has a natural tendency to cheat on her husband because she was one of the four that could not be trusted: money, sultan, time, and woman. Page 220. Woman had been created for the comfort and enjoyment of her husband. In that way, the religious heritage made the Muslim woman to believe herself to be a mere vagina, and hence she became horma, taboo, and haram, forbidden. Page 221. If she kept her faith in her vagina and gave enjoyment to her husband and master, she would enter heaven. Page 220. Woman's faith could not be perfect except by her complete obedience and submission to her husband, and such obedience would secure to her a place in heaven as a prostitute among the many harem of the man. Page 221. This gloomy picture that Al-Kimni depicted for the Muslim woman irritated many Muslim professors and ulama, or scholars, of Al-Azhar al-Sharif University, who believed that Islam had honored the woman and put her in the best place. Al-Kimni states that the Quran gives two contradictory rights for women, Al-Kimni 2004, page 170. While some verses make woman equals to man, such as in Surah Al-Imran 3, verse 195, Surah Al-Nahl 16, verse 97, Surah Al-Taba 9, verse 71, Surah Al-Ahzab 33, verse 35, and Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 38. This positive attitude towards women has been distorted by Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34, which allows the man to beat his rebellious wife or disobedient daughter. In a hadith mentioned by Al-Bukhari, the Prophet said, "Any people make woman their leader will not prosper," page 170. Al-Kimni quotes many verses and hadiths to show that woman has been placed in a low position by Islam. In this regard, Al-Kimni refers to an incident in which he was condemned as a kafir or unbeliever by the professors and doctors of Al-Azhar University because he exposed in his book Al-Fashion and Al-Watan, Fascists and the Nation, the low status in which Islam put the woman, that she was inferior to man in every respect and made for his sexual pleasure. The main reason for their protest was that Al-Kimni makes mistake by demanding rights for women, which Islam gave to men only, page 177. The samples of the misogynistic hadiths and the accounts of Al-Kimni give an insight into the theory of women in Islam. It is evident that women are understood as causing constant threats to the social order and the religion, and as such they need to be brought under control. Quoting the words of Darlene M. Jushka, "If women are understood to carry the darker elements of culture, the chaotic, the sexual, the irrational, then the suppression of these perceived threats is necessary." Jushka 2001, page 161. Men's superiority over women in Islam. The Quran states that men and women are equal regarding their religious obligations, rewards and punishment, and oneness of their creation. See Surah Al-Imran 3, verse 195, Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 1. However, in other verses the Quran teaches that men are superior and 1 degree above the women. See Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3 and verse 34, Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 228. The Algerian Fadela Mrabat commenting on the Quran verse Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34 says, "What is really being communicated through this verse is that God prefers man over woman because the latter are inferior to the former." Citing Smith 1978, page 526. According to Islam, men are superior to women in knowledge, power, authority, and that is because God prefers the former to the latter and men spend out of their means on women. Therefore, women are thought to be deficient in intelligence and religion. The Algerian Fadela Mrabat concluded that those scholars who want to liberate Muslim women are indirectly asking them to stop believing in their holy scriptures, the Quran and hadiths, because those sacred texts make women inferior to men. Women are deficient in gratitude and as witness. The Quran states, "And call into witness 2 witnesses, men, or if the 2 be not men, then 1 man and 2 women, such witness as you approve of, that if 1 woman errs the other will remind her." Surah Al-Baqarah 2, verse 282. There is no definition so widely used and accepted among Muslims for defining the woman than she is awara. The term awara is defined in Encyclopedia of Islam as the external genitals, especially of the female, Hack and Newton 1996, page 5. The word is derived from the noun nakedness. So, to put it in a simple meaning, the entire body of the woman is nakedness or a pussy. In another hadith, Al-Tirmizi reported that woman is awara. The woman is awara. When she goes outside of her house, the devil welcomes her. Al-Tirmizi, volume 2, page 65. This hadith says that the woman is always possessed by demons. Therefore, she is dangerous to the Islamic society and hence she is supposed to be imprisoned inside her house. The above 2 hadiths are pertaining to the woman's covering. There is disagreement between the founders of the 4 schools of the Sharia. While Maliki and Hanbali schools allow the hands and the face to remain uncovered, the Hanafi and Shafi considered them to be awara and hence demand the woman to be completely veiled from head to feet. Hack and Newton 1996, page 5. Some Islamic group like supporters of the Prophet's Sunnah considered even the woman's voice as awara and therefore would not permit her to speak anywhere. Woman is a crooked rib. Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim agreed upon the following hadith. The woman is like a rib, if you try to straighten her, she will break. Therefore, if you want to get benefit from her, do so while she still has some crookedness. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 113. In Kitab Adab al-Nika, al-Tirmizi states, 3 persons, if you esteem them, they will dishonor you, and if you dishonor them, they will esteem you. The woman, the servant, and the Nabatiyah, al-Tirmizi, Hadith in page 51. Men's rights on women. Islam has ascribed some rights, which men have on their women. The most important of these rights is total obedience and submission of the women to their husbands. Wife's obedience to her husband and father. Many hadiths are reported which comment on Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34. By the way, the Arabic word al-Nisa means in English the women. Therefore, this surah is full of misogynistic teachings against women. The Prophet Muhammad said, there are 3 persons whose prayer will not be accepted, nor their virtues be taken above: the runaway slave until he returns back to his master, the woman with whom her husband is dissatisfied, and the drunkard until he becomes sober. Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Book 1, Hadith number 74. He also said, whosoever a woman dies while her husband is pleased with her, she will enter paradise. Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Book 1, Hadith number 60. The Prophet of Allah said, when a man calls his wife to satisfy his desire, let her come to him though she is occupied at the oven. Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Book 1, Hadith number 61. The Prophet also said, by the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad, no woman can fulfill her duty towards Allah until she fulfills her duty towards her husband. If he asks her for intimacy, even if she is on her camel saddle, she should not refuse. Sunan Ibn Majah, Book 9, Hadith number 1926. In this regards, a prominent Malaysian Islamic scholar, Perak Mufti Tan Sri Harsani Zakaria said, even the Prophet says even when they're riding on the back of the camel, when the husband asks her, she must give, he exclaimed. So there's no such thing as rape in marriage. This is made by European people. Why should we follow? In other words, the Muslim husband is allowed to rape his wife if she refused to sleep with him. The Messenger of Allah said, whenever a man calls his wife to his bed and she refused to come to him, and then he passes the night in an angry mood, the angels curse her till she gets up at dawn. Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 7, Hadith number 121. The above hadith is agreed upon. Sahih Muslim reported the same hadith, but with slight difference. When a man calls his wife to his bed, and she refuses, the one who is in the sky will be angry with her until her husband is pleased with her. Hacken Newton 1996, page 7. He also said, had I ordered anybody to prostrate before anyone, I would have ordered women to prostrate before their husbands on account of men's rights over the women ordained by Allah. Mishkat al-Masabi, English translation, Hadith number 70. Reported by Abu Dawud, Ahmed, al-Tirmizi, Ibn Majah, and Ibn Hibban. Wife's beating. The Quran states, righteous women are therefore obedient. And those you fear may be rebellious, nushus, admonish them, banish them to their couches, and then you must beat them. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34. The above verse has become very controversial among modern scholars. Feminists, reformists, and liberal Muslims argue that this verse does not imply that the husband can beat his wife if she becomes rebellious. They try to find different meanings to the Arabic word adrebuhan and refer the suitable one to the interpretation of the verse. An example for these efforts can be seen in Asma Parl's book, The Believing Women in Islam. However, these efforts have become difficult to accept when we refer the verse to the occasion of its revelation. The above verse was revealed in connection with a woman who complained to the Prophet Muhammad that her husband slapped her on the face, which was still marked by the slap. At first the Prophet said to her, "Get even with him," but then added, "Wait until I think about it." Later, the above verse was revealed, after which the Prophet said, "We wanted one thing, but Allah wanted another, and what Allah wanted is best," citing Hack and Newton 1996, page 9. Beating the wife is allowed by the Sharia in 4 cases. Although the Quran allows the wife's beating for her disobedience, some Muslim scholars mentioned 4 reasons. 1. If she does not wear fineries though her husband asked her to do so. 2. When she is called for sexual intercourse and she refuses without any lawful excuse. 3. When she is ordered to take a bath to clean herself from her impurity for performing her prayer and she refused. 4. When she goes out of her house without permission of her husband. In Sahih Muslim, Aisha narrated a hadith in which she admitted that the Prophet struck her on her chest until it caused pain. He struck me on the chest which caused me pain, and then said, "Did you think that Allah and His Apostle would deal unjustly?" Sahih Muslim, Book 4, Hadith number 2127. The hadiths, which speak about women, are countless in number. A few of them show favor to women. Those few hadiths, which speak well about women, are referring to her as a mother and not as a wife or daughter. Abu Hurairah reported that a man came to the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, and asked, "O Messenger of Allah, who is the person who has the greatest right on me with regards to kindness and attention?" He replied, "Your mother." "Then who?" He replied, "Your mother." "Then who?" He replied, "Your mother." "Then who?" He replied, "Your father." Another hadith said, "Paradise is under the feet of mothers." Dr. Suaib Hassan, commenting on the second hadith, said, "The above hadith with this wording is da'if, unauthentic, but its meaning is contained in the hadith of Ibn Majah and al-Nasa'i that a man came to the Prophet, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, and said, 'O Messenger of Allah, I intend to go in jihad on a military expedition, but I have come to ask your advice.' He said, 'Is your mother alive?' He said, 'Yes.' He said, 'Then stay with her, for the garden is under her feet.' Hack and Newton 1996, page 12. Feminists, reformists, and liberal Muslims very often quote the above two hadiths to support their views that Islam is an egalitarian religion and that the misogynistic hadiths were the invention of latter generations. However, these two hadiths advise sons to be kind to their mothers, but neither the husbands to their wives nor fathers to their daughters. However, these two hadiths are not accepted as authentic hadiths because neither Sahih al-Bukhari nor Sahih Muslim included them in their collections. Only Ibn Majah and al-Nasa'i mention them. These two collections are hardly quoted by Muslim scholars. Having the above-mentioned verses and hadiths in the main sacred books of Islam, the Quran and hadiths, still some Muslim scholars claim that religion is favoring women and giving them equal rights with men. It is hard to believe such a claim. Dr. Natasha concludes, to accept the egalitarian message of Islam and to deny its misogynistic teachings, for me is only wishful thinking. Such efforts will not benefit those for whom the efforts are made. Muslim women who live in the West are not liberated because of these efforts, but the societies in which they live granted them equality with their men. Muslim women who live in Muslim societies are still live under the yoke of bondage of the so-called infallible prophet of God Muhammad, who incorporated and perpetuated for eternity in his thousands of hadiths and verses of the Quran which teach those misogynistic teachings about women. Those evil anti-feminist teachings are fixed and rigid, and as such, they are not open for criticism or reformation. Any Muslim thinker who tried to criticize or reform them had been accused as an apostate and put to death. If those Muslim feminists go to any Muslim country and oppose the teachings of the hadiths, they will be accused as apostates and put to death. Therefore, according to Dr. Natasha, the emancipation of Muslim women should be done by outsider thinkers, and such liberation must be implemented and forced on all Muslim societies wherever they are living on the planet Earth. After all, freedom and equality are not an option, but rights to all human beings, males as well as females. Chapter 19. Dr. Natasha and the Muslim Feminists. By publishing her dissertation as a public book which many people had access to it, Dr. Natasha made a serious challenge to the Muslim feminists. The feminists considered the book as an open challenge and direct attack on them. One statement in the book has been considered an attack and exceedingly offensive to them. Dr. Natasha stated that Muslim feminists are more dangerous to Muslim women than Muslim men. She considered the feminists as dangerous people because of their false claims that Islam equally treats men and women, and that many of the misogynistic teachings and practices of Muslims are not Islamic. but the creation of later generations of Muslim scholars and leaders. For example, the female genital mutilation is considered by them to be just a cultural practice and therefore has nothing to do with Islam. They also contended that it is an African custom and predated the advent of Islam. Dr. Natasha rejected their unsubstantial argument because their assertion is based on a conjecture. If the custom of female genital mutilation is an African, why then only Muslims of Africa such as Somalis, Egyptians, Sudanese, and Eritreans practice it until today? Why we do not find African Christians such as the Ethiopians, Kenyans, South Sudanese, and South Africans follow such barbaric custom? Moreover, if the practice of female genital mutilation predated Islam, then why Islam did not abolish it? On the contrary, there are many authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad which endorse and encourage that evil and harmful custom. Some of them said female genital mutilation was an old custom practiced by the Egyptian pharaohs. However, there is no evidence found that the ancient Egyptians had practiced it on their females. The feminists said polygamy was meant to solve a temporary problem that Muslim women faced after their husbands were killed in the Battle of Uhud. Dr. Natasha refuted such false claim by stating that only 70 Muslim men were killed in that battle, and there was no record found showing that the wives of those slain men were married by other Muslim men. If that was the only reason for polygamy, why the Quran did not clearly state that only during war the practice of polygamy is permissible, and why Muslim men practiced it throughout the history of Islam and do it until the present day? Dr. Natasha supported her point by referring to the greatest Muslim theologian Al-Ghazali. According to the well-known Muslim scholar Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, polygamy is necessary because it satisfies human instinct of the man, citing Mernisi 1987, page 47. The Moroccan scholar Fatima Mernisi, commenting on the words of al-Ghazali, states that this kind of argument reveals to us Muslim theory of sexuality. For the man burdened with a strong sexual desire and for whom one woman is not enough to guarantee his chastity, chastity for a married person being abstention from zina or fornication, it is recommended that he adds to the first wife others. The total should not exceed, for wives, quoting Mernisi 1987, page 47. Polygamy in Islam is associated with the belief that women are sources of enjoyment for men. History of Islam revealed that women were used by their male partners for the purpose of entertainment. Examples for this are stories of the Arabian Nights, Kitab al-Aghani of Abi al-Faraj al-Asfahani, the women jari, pleasure slaves, for the Abbasid caliphs, and the 72 Houris, female creatures in paradise who are supposed to be offered as rewards to male believers. They are described in the Quran as beautiful, eternally virgin, and eternally loving, Mernisi 1988, page 71. The descriptions of the Huri girls in the Quran have a great effect on the relationship between men and women in Islam. Men look at their wives as inferior to the Huris in beauty, loyalty, and pleasure providing. The Huri girls are not human beings, but special creatures that God created for men's enjoyment and pleasure in paradise. The Quran describes the physical and sexual beauties and attraction of those heavenly creatures in remarkable ways. See Quran, Surah Al-Dukhan 44, verses 51 to 54, Surah Al-Rahman 55, verses 56 to 58, Surah 55, verse 72, and Surah Al-Muzammil 73, verse 33. Wife beating is mentioned in the Quran, but the feminists argued that the verse could be interpreted in various ways. Feminists argue that this verse does not imply that the husband can beat his wife if she becomes rebellious. They try to find different meanings to the word adrebahan, beat them, and refer the suitable one to the interpretation of the verse. An example of these efforts can be seen in Asma Parl's book, The Believing Women in Islam. She said the word can be interpreted to mean show good example to your disobedient wife. However, these efforts became difficult to accept when we refer the verse to the occasion of its revelation. The above verse was revealed in connection with a woman who complained to Muhammad that her husband slapped her on the face, which was still marked by the slap. At first, the Prophet said to her, "Get even with him," but then added, "Wait until I think about it." Later, the above verse was revealed, after which the Prophet said, We wanted one thing, but Allah has decided differently, and what Allah wanted is best. Hack and Newton 1996, page 9. In other words, Muhammad wanted to punish the man for slapping his wife, but Allah stopped Muhammad and permitted the men to beat their disobedient women. In another hadith, the beloved wife Aisha said the woman's face became like green cloth due to the powerful beating of her husband. Child marriage is rejected by feminists also, although there is a verse in Surah Al-Talaq 65, verse 4, endorsing it, and the Prophet practiced with his child bride, Aisha. She was 6 when he married her and 9 years old when he had sex with her. In short, the feminists tried to reject every evil practice against the woman as not a true teaching of the Quran and the authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. Dr. Natasha opposed this kind of argument, and instead, she argued in her dissertation that all those misogynistic teachings are real teachings of Islam and are supported by true verses of the Quran and authentic hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. She also contended that the feminists' arguments and rejection of the misogynistic message of Islam are only on papers, but no Muslim country has accepted them, and no Muslim woman is liberated through those academic and fruitless arguments. On the contrary, this kind of arguing against the misogynistic teachings of Islam strengthens, covers up, and perpetuates the abuse of Muslim women. According to Dr. Natasha, Muslim females could not be liberated if Muslim countries are allowed to continue following the teachings of the Quran and the Hadiths. Their emancipation could be realized only if Muslim countries are secularized and religion has no strong bearing on social life. Islamic religion should not be taught in public schools, should not regulate the life of women in their houses, should not restrict the movements of women in the streets. Workplaces should be open for both sexes, and there should be an official ban and condemnation on polygamy, child marriage, female genital mutilation, wearing of niqabs, and women should not be forbidden from occupying leading positions in the public and private sectors. Dr. Natasha is fully aware of the obvious fact that such demands might not be realized soon, and no Muslim society would accept and implement them. Instead, those demands might be interpreted by Muslim leaders and men as an open call on banning the religion of Islam itself. For that reason, Dr. Natasha believes that the liberation of Muslim females could not be achieved through Muslim feminists, Muslim women rights activists, or liberal and modernist Muslim thinkers. The emancipation of Muslim females must be forced on Muslim countries the same way the abolishment of the slavery system was forced on them on the past by the colonizers and other Western anti-slavery organizations. To enforce the emancipation of Muslim women, Muslim countries should be recolonized. But the occupation of the Muslim countries might not be easy as it was in the past. The recent occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan had brought some considerable positive changes in the status of women in those countries, but since the main goals are to fight terrorism, the complete emancipation of women is not yet achieved. Dr. Natasha also knows no Western country would like to colonize another country for the sake of liberating the women of that country. There must be another way to achieve that goal. The media and the internet in our time became the most powerful and effective means of communication and education. Unfortunately, most of the Muslim countries are poor countries, and the women of those lands are not educated. Besides that, the governments of those countries control the media and decide what the people should hear and watch. However, the international TV satellite channels and access to the internet became available in most of the Arab and Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Oman, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Sudan, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. Many Western countries received in the past decades influx of the mass immigration of Muslims through legal and illegal means. Dr. Natasha believes those Muslim immigrants should be exposed to fruitful critiques of the misogynistic teachings of Islam and be encouraged to discard such evil practices. Out of the 55 Muslim countries, only the above-mentioned regions have access to the international media and the internet. Unfortunately, most of the Asian and African Muslim countries are poor countries, and most of those Muslims have no access to the internet and the international TV satellite channels. Even though Dr. Natasha Shams al-Din believes those Muslims who have access to modern means of social communication must be reached and enlightened and liberated from the evil misogynistic teachings of the Quran and the Hadiths. For sure, their mass liberation will influence other inaccessible poor Muslim countries.